The deafening silence of Penny. Weak Beckles, when Selective Outrage exposes political hypocrisy, an editorial by Professor Wall Street. Opposition leader Penelope Beckles' recent criticism of Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessa's handling of the state of emergency reveals the breathtaking hypocrisy that has earned her the moniker Penny Weak Beckles, and the dubious distinction of being perhaps the weakest opposition leader in Trinidad and Tobago's political history. Her sudden discovery of her voice after a decade of silence during the PNM's governance represents not principled opposition, but opportunistic political theater of the most transparent kind. Where, we must ask, was this fierce advocate for transparency and public accountability when her own PNM government implemented a state of emergency on December 30th, 2024? Where was her demand for detailed explanations when Dr. Keith Rowley's administration declared that SOE without the comprehensive public justification she now demands from Persad-Bissessa? The answer is as clear as it is damning. She was silent, complicit, and seemingly injected with political Novocaine that rendered her incapable of holding her own party accountable. Here are 10 reasons why Penny Weak Beckles is being disingenuous and hypocritical. 1. The decade of selective silence. For 10 years under PNM rule, Beckles maintained silence about government transparency and accountability. Most notably, when her own party declared a state of emergency on December 30th, 2024, she offered no public demands for detailed explanation, no calls for transparency, and no criticism of the decision-making process. Her voice was conspicuously absent when accountability mattered most, when her own party was in power just months ago. This selective application of standards reveals not principled opposition, but rank political opportunism. 2. The SOE Double Standard. Beckles' criticism of Persad-Bissessa for not immediately appearing publicly to explain the SOE ignores that her own PNM government implemented a state of emergency on December 30th, 2024, without the level of detailed public explanation she now demands. The hypocrisy is staggering. What was acceptable governance under the PNM just months ago becomes unacceptable authoritarianism under the UNC. This isn't principled opposition, it's partisan hackery disguised as democratic oversight. 3. Ignoring the Prime Minister's clear statement. Perhaps most tellingly, Beckles appears to have missed or deliberately ignored Prime Minister Persad-Bissessa's detailed media release explaining the SOE decision. The Prime Minister clearly stated, "I will not stand idly by for years, months, weeks, or even days while a minority of illegally armed individuals act in concert to intimidate the people of TNT." This comprehensive explanation makes Beckles' criticism factually baseless and politically motivated. 4. The institutional memory deficit. Beckles seems to suffer from convenient amnesia about her own government's practices. When the PNM declared a state of emergency on December 30th, 2024, just months before losing power, it was implemented with far less public consultation and explanation than what Persad-Bissessa has provided. Her current demands for transparency ring hollow when compared to her party's own recent opacity. This selective memory serves her political interests while insulting the intelligence of the Trinidad and Tobago public. 5. The weak leadership pattern. Beckles' criticism reveals the very weakness that has defined her political career: the inability to take consistent, principled stance. She was weak when her own party needed accountability, and she's weak now in her opportunistic criticism. True opposition leadership requires consistent application of standards, not politically convenient selective outrage. Her pattern of weakness when it matters and manufactures strength when it's politically expedient defines ineffective leadership. 6. Missing security briefing context. Beckles' criticism that only the Commissioner of Police was visible ignores the proper institutional chain of command during security operations. The COP provided detailed briefings about a serious criminal plot targeting public officials, information that came through proper security channels. Her demand for immediate prime ministerial appearances during active security operations reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of both security protocols and executive responsibility. 7. The parliamentary process contradiction. Beckles complains about the Prime Minister's absence while simultaneously preparing to participate in the parliamentary debate on the SOE extension. This contradiction is telling. She demands immediate public explanation, while the proper constitutional forum for such debates is Parliament. Her criticism suggests either a misunderstanding of Westminster parliamentary procedure or a deliberate attempt to undermine established democratic processes for political gain. 8. The timing hypocrisy. The speed with which Beckles found her voice after losing power is remarkable. For a decade, she was the political equivalent of a mute observer, watching her own government's actions without public criticism. Yet within days of being in opposition, she discovered an apparently bottomless reservoir of criticism and demand for transparency. This timing reveals her criticism as politically motivated rather than principled. 9. The false equivalence problem. Beckles attempts to create false equivalencies between the current government's detailed explanations and her own party's historical opacity. The current administration provided police briefings, ministerial statements, and prime ministerial releases, far more transparency than the PNM typically offered. Her criticism ignores this reality in favor of politically convenient mythology about her own party's supposed transparency. 10. The leadership credibility crisis. Perhaps most fundamentally, Beckles lacks the credibility to demand transparency and accountability from others when she failed to provide either during her own party's tenure in government. Her decade of silence has permanently compromised her ability to serve as an effective opposition leader. The people of Trinidad and Tobago have witnessed her transformation from silent enabler to opportunistic critic, undermining any moral authority she might claim. The pattern of political weakness. Beckles' approach to opposition leadership reveals a disturbing pattern. Strength when politically convenient, weakness when courage is required. During the PNM's tenure, when real opposition oversight was needed, she was nowhere to be found. Now when the UNC is implementing security measures with greater transparency than her own party ever provided, she suddenly discovers the principles of accountability and public explanation. This pattern explains why she has earned the designation Weak Beckles. True political strength requires consistency, courage, and the willingness to hold all governments, including one's own party, to the same standards. Beckles has demonstrated none of these qualities, instead offering selective outrage that serves her political interests while ignoring her own party's historical failures. The Novocaine Effect. The description of Beckles as being injected with Novocaine during the PNM's tenure is particularly appropriate. Like a patient under anesthesia, she seemed incapable of feeling or responding to the pain her own government inflicted on the country through poor governance, lack of transparency, and authoritarian measures. Her voice was completely numbed when it came to holding her own party accountable. Now, miraculously, the anesthesia has worn off, but only for criticism of the opposition party. This selective sensitivity reveals not a newfound commitment to democratic principles, but a politically opportunistic awakening that serves her partisan interests rather than the public good. The weakest opposition leader in history. Beckles' combination of selective silence, opportunistic criticism, and fundamental misunderstanding of her role has indeed earned her the distinction of being the weakest opposition leader in Trinidad and Tobago's political history. Effective opposition leadership requires several qualities she has consistently failed to demonstrate. Consistency. Applying the same standards to all governments, including one's own party courage. Speaking truth to power regardless of political consequences. Competence. Understanding the proper role of opposition in a Westminster system. Credibility. Maintaining moral authority through principled stands. Her failure on all four counts has rendered her ineffective as an opposition leader and irrelevant as a voice for democratic accountability. In conclusion, the credibility chasm, penny weak. Beckles' criticism of the Prime Minister's handling of the state of emergency represents everything wrong with opportunistic opposition politics. Her decade of silence, followed by sudden selective outrage, reveals a politician more interested in partisan advantage than democratic accountability. The Prime Minister provided clear, detailed explanations for the SOE through multiple channels, police briefings, ministerial statements, and official releases. The threat was real, the response was measured, and the transparency was unprecedented compared to previous PNM administrations. Yet Beckles chooses to ignore these facts in favor of politically convenient criticism. Her transformation from silent enabler to opportunistic critic has permanently damaged her credibility as an opposition leader. The people of Trinidad and Tobago deserve better than a leader who discovers her voice only when it serves her political interests, while remaining mute when real courage and consistency are required. Until Beckles can demonstrate the consistency, courage, and competence required for effective opposition leadership, she will remain what she has become, a weak voice in the wilderness of her own making, ignored by a public that has seen through her selective outrage and found it wanting. The weak designation isn't just a political nickname. It's an accurate assessment of a leader who has failed to meet the basic requirements of democratic opposition in a Westminster system.